Started. Hi, everybody. My name is Angie Rupert, and I am an E-2 and E-1 visa attorney. It's great to see you all here today. Thanks so much for joining. As mentioned earlier, if you weren't here, please go ahead and write any questions that you might have in the chat. We're not going to get to everything, but we will get to some things. So if you have any questions about the E-2 visa or the E-1 visa, go ahead and type those in the chat and we will try to get to as many as we can. So let's talk a little bit about trends in 2025, shall we? I will say that 2025 politically has been a little unpredictable. I would think we all would agree with that. However, in the world of E2s and E1s, there's a little more stability, right? And we talked about this a little bit last time. There have been some changes on the USCIS side, right? So not at the consulates as much, but if you are here in the United States under a different status and want to change to the E2 status, there have been a few changes and they actually are not great, right? So historically, you can change status from one status to the E2. However, if you are, and as long as you file before your I-94 expires, you are kind of in a pending mode, right? You've overstayed, although you're not accruing unlawful presence. But now the change has been, if you're ultimately denied and your I-94 has expired, you could be given a notice to appear, right, in court in order to be deported. That is not a great development in the world of E2s and E1s. But again, that's only through USCIS. That doesn't really affect what's going on with the consulates and embassies around the world. So let's talk a little bit about the consulates and embassies and what have we seen. So far, I would say we file frequently in Canada. We file frequently in the UK. Some in Mexico, some in Australia, that type of thing. I would say in Mexico, at this point, you should always be prepared for an RFE, meaning a request for further evidence. They do have a strict page limit there. And in the last few months, we have seen that every single applicant that we have sent there, they have requested additional documentation. Maybe they should just make their page limit a little bit longer, but what do I know, right? So far, so good with those. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a weak case. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't trust the case. It's just kind of, it appears to be, based on what we're seeing, it appears to be part of their process right now. So just be prepared for that if you're filing in Mexico. In Canada, the good news is Canada is doing great with their time limits, meaning when they're getting the application, getting back to the applicant regarding the interview and that type of thing, things seem to be kind of rolling right along, which is fantastic. We love the U.S. Consulate in Toronto. We find them to be incredibly fair. We have noticed a couple of trends. They are asking for more documentation than they historically did. Now, they also have a very strict page limit, and they always have, but they cut it by even 20 pages more in, geez, I believe that was probably August of 2024. So right now there's a 50-page limit, which makes it really, really tight, and they are asking for additional documents in some cases. In particular, it appears like if you have a C Corp, you're definitely going to need that share ledger. We've seen that a couple of times specifically. And then in London, what are we seeing? London has been a little bit unpredictable. You may have seen that on some of the maybe listservs that you're on, Facebook groups, things like that. Because I've heard that from clients saying, oh, I'm reading this Facebook group and they're saying this about London or that about London. So we have had approvals in London. We have also had very long wait times in London right now. And unfortunately, for British applicants, you really do need to apply in the UK. The way that the treaty was written many, 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 many decades and hundreds of years ago, you really do need to apply in London. So you can't kind of try to apply in a third country, that type of thing. Also in 2025, now this is not new. In fact, this has been going on since 2020, 5 years ago, but there are still consulates around the world that are taking really long times, right? Madrid, more than a year. Colombia, more than a year. Turkey is about at a year. London, as mentioned, 5 to 6 months. So there are places that are just taking a really long time. So always factor that in if you're from one of those countries and maybe others, right? Those are just ones that I know of. They are taking quite some time. So be prepared to either wait or come up with a different strategy as to how to kind of move that along. So those are some of the things that we have seen worldwide at the consulates and embassies, and then again at USCIS for the E-2 and the E-1 visa. However, I think we've had more approvals in the last 5 or 6 months than probably the 5 or 6 months prior. So it's not affecting the approval rates that I've seen. Sometimes they are taking longer. They're asking for more documents. That's at the consulates and embassies. Again, at USCIS, and again, that has not affected any of our clients at USCIS, but there are new rules about overstaying your I-94 and ultimate denials. Okay, so let's talk here, or let's get to some of the questions, shall we? For E-1 visas, how long after getting accepted do you have to move? So for E-1s, you never have to move. And E-1, particularly if your business is in your home country. So in many cases, there's a business in a home country, there is not a business in the United States. They just trade with the United States. Lots of their clients are in the United States. So with an E-1, you don't necessarily have to move to the United States. So that's that. Lisbon is a good consulate to a pride. You have any idea how fast it is there? I really don't at this point. So I don't have any times for Lisbon at this moment. Okay, approvals are impacted by Trump. Well, we talked a little bit about that. We're not really seeing that at the consulates. There are another thing I guess that I will say is they are going into more detail. At least this is what we have been told, more detail with social media. So be prepared for that. As you have probably seen, now this is not about the E-2 or E-1 visa specifically, but they're really, really cracking down on anything that can be construed as anti-Semitism. So hopefully none of you have that anyway on your social media, but that's going to be a problem. That's for sure going to be a problem. And that's regardless of the type of visa, right? Okay. Can I apply for an E-2 visa with a service-based business that has no physical office? Part of that is yes, and part of that is no. Can you have a service-based business? 100%. Can you have something without an office? Not really, right? One of the big challenges here is somebody, let's say, so they have a marketing business, right? Service-based business. They're going to be helping people design websites and run their social media accounts or whatever. Okay, fine. And they said, well, I really don't need an office. I can just do it from home. Anytime that you don't have an office, you don't have physical connection to the United States, you always run the risk at that interview of them going, wow, this looks great. You've got these clients, you're doing this, you're doing that. Why don't you just continue to run it from your home office at your home in your third country or in your other, non-US country? Why don't you do it that way, right? You've got to make those connections. So yes, you can have a service-based business, but we always recommend that you have an office space. Always, always, always. It really helps to strengthen your case. Okay. Have you ever done a case from Pakistan? Yes. We have never done an E-1 in Pakistan, so I can't tell you that. I will tell you that the reputation of the U.S. consulate in Pakistan is not great, right? Interviews are very long there. They require a lot of documentation. So it's not at all that you can't get approved. In fact, as you probably know, it is a treaty country, so you can, but you've got to be very, very diligent and thorough with your documentation, okay? For sure, I know that. What is the path to citizenship if we are on an E-2? There is none. So that's that. Your path to citizenship would be to figure out which type of green card you may best qualify for and attempt to file for that. We do not handle green cards, but the long story short is the E-2 will never become a green card and will never become citizenship. Many people enter the United States on an E-2 and later at some point in the future apply for a certain type of green card. Then once you get the green card, you have to wait a certain number of years, then you can apply for citizenship. So keep that in mind. I am an IT consultant and I'd like to set up something similar in the US. How much is the minimum investment? We always recommend that the minimum investment for any business is $100,000, 100,000 US dollars. Okay, we always recommend that for every business. In some cases, the investment's going to be even more than that, right? because in some cases, the business might be valued at more than that. So for people who are buying existing businesses, let's say you're going to be buying an existing business and you have it appraised, which we always recommend anytime you're buying a business, and the appraisal is $350,000, whatever. You're probably going to need to invest $350,000. Okay. So a minimum in no case should any case have less than $100,000 USD invested at the time of application. Some cases, some businesses will require more than that. So keep that in mind. Okay. Let's see. I provide assistance for incorporation and business plan review. We do a business plan review. We do not incorporate. So no, we don't do that, but we will do a business plan review as it pertains to immigration purposes only. The way that we work is you will have a business plan written. And then once you approve it 100% and you think, yes, from my business perspective, what I anticipate doing with this business, what this business does, this is 100% accurate, then you send it to us and we will review for immigration purposes only. Yes. What about a $40,000 investment? Isn't enough? I would say see about 90 seconds back in this application, back in this video. No, it's not. I would not apply for a visa with $40,000. I think that you are looking for a denial. That if the valuation is $500,000, would the following breakdown be okay? 150 cash, 150 loan, 200 sellers note? No, because that means you have $350,000 worth of loans based on the business, and then you only have $150,000 investment, which is only, what is that? Oh God, not quite 33%. So no, I wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be what I would advise. Okay, so I think we got through everything there. Oh, how did you have an office if you're not yet in the US? So a lot of people will come to the US to set up a business, to find an office, to spend some money, that type of thing. So that's how most people get an office, even if you're not in the United States. Yes. An E-2 visa is for a US-based business that you plan on directing and developing. An E-1 visa is a business, maybe in your home country, in this case, Canada, that has a lot of US clients or suppliers or vendors, but the business is based in Canada. Typically, that's how an E-1 works. There are some other things, but if you have a business operating in the United States, generally, that's going to be an E-2. I mean, obviously, we have a video about that too. Which one is better for me, an E-2 or an E-1? So I highly recommend you go and watch that video. So extensions. How are E-2 extensions nowadays? I mean, the process is exactly the same. However, I will tell you again, with USCIS, there are issues if you go beyond your I-94 date while it's pending and it's ultimately denied. So that could be an issue. Other than that, I mean, the process, the documentation, all of that is essentially the same. There are different mailing addresses, so just be sure that you're always mailing it to the correct thing. The mailing addresses changed 3 months ago. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but the mailing addresses did change. So just be sure that if you are mailing in an USCIS change of status to E-2 or extension, that you mail it to the correct place because those did change. Like each section doing a different type of business. Okay, so somebody's asking about can a business have 5 components, like each doing a different type of business? It really depends, right? So there's nothing that says you can't do it, but it has to all make sense. That's the thing I will say about E-2 visa applications, right? I actually just had a consultation, I think it was yesterday, and we were talking a little bit about this, that there are not a lot written. There's not a lot that says you must do this, you must not do that. There's hardly anything like that. The requirements are things like language like this. It must be a substantial business. It must not be marginal. That's the requirement. What does that even mean? I don't know, right? So a lot of it is on a case-by-case basis, meaning every case kind of has to be reviewed. Does this make sense? And that's always the smell test. Anytime you're dealing with the E-2 visa or any component or any requirement of the E-2 visa, does this make sense? I don't know. Does it? Does it make sense that this type of business would have these 5 different components and then it's all going to work together? Does it make sense? I don't know. Maybe. right? I mean, it seems like a lot for a brand new business to have 5 different ways of generating revenue, unless they're all very closely related. So maybe it wouldn't work, but maybe it would. Maybe it's a business that's been in existence for a long time. It already has 4 different kind of pieces and you're adding a 5th, right? So everything when you're working on your E-2 application, that's got to be the thing that comes into your mind every time. Every time you're working on a requirement or what you're doing or what the business is going to be, does this make sense? Would a person who doesn't know me at all, the consular officer at the US consulates and embassies, would that person look at this and go, oh, yeah, I get it? Or would they go, wait, what? How's this going to work? If it's the second, no, then it won't. If it's the first, then I think it should. But you've got to put yourself in the consular officer's position. They've got 5 people ahead of you and 5 people behind you, all doing E-2 visas. They're going to look at this for 90 seconds and they're going to talk to you about it for about 3.5 minutes. Are they going to be able to get it? Because if it's going to take longer than that for them to get it, understand it, and see that it meets the requirements, then it's not going to work. Okay. So that is what I can tell you about that. All right. Anybody else who hasn't asked a question, have a question that we can answer here quickly? Because I think we're going to wrap here in a few minutes. So anybody out there that has maybe a question that they have not posted anything in the chat yet, let us know. Again, I would just say, I would say that if you are thinking about the E-2 or E-1 visa, do it. I don't think that 2025 is any harsher or less harsh than any other year, right? I don't think politically there's a lot of difference in the requirements or the adjudication. I will say that, but this is again the last 5 years. Some countries are taking a really long time to adjudicate. And I will say that consulates and embassy wise, they're going to probably be spending more time on your social media. So take all of those things into consideration. But as far as have the requirements changed, have the documents that they're looking for changed, no, that I haven't seen any evidence of that at all. Okay, so with that, I think I got to at least everyone one time, which is great. So with that, I think we're going to wrap today. So please reach out anytime. We'd be thrilled to speak with you about an E-2 or E-1 visa. And I think we will bid adieu for today. Thank you all so much for joining. Reach out anytime. We'd be absolutely thrilled to speak with you about your E-2 visa. Bye, everyone.